The diner smelled like burnt coffee and broken dreams. I inhaled the familiar scent as I pushed through the glass door at exactly 5:47 a.m., 3 minutes before my shift started. The overhead fluorescent lights buzzed like dying insects, casting their sickly yellow glow over the cracked vinyl booths and scratched formica counters. My sneakers, worn so thin I could feel every crack in the linoleum, squeaked against the floor as I made my way to the back, tying my stained apron around my waist with practiced efficiency. "You're early," Margie grunted from behind the register, not looking up from her crossword puzzle. Her cigarette-roughened voice scraped against the morning silence. "Traffic was light," I lied. The truth was, I'd left my apartment 40 minutes early because the landlord had been pounding on doors again, and I couldn't face him. Not today. Not when I was already $230 short on rent with only $18 left in my checking account until Friday's paycheck cleared. I grabbed the coffee pot and started my rounds, filling cups for the regulars who barely acknowledged my existence, the construction workers in booth 3, the taxi driver at the counter, the businessman who always left exactly 15%, calculated to the penny. I was invisible to them, just another part of the scenery, like the faded menu boards or the perpetually broken jukebox in the corner. The morning rush came and went in its usual blur of scrambled eggs, crispy bacon, and white toast. My feet ached. My lower back throbbed from standing. The small bandage on my left hand, where I'd burned myself yesterday on the grill, had started to peel at the edges. I kept moving because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant remembering that my bank account was nearly empty, my car needed repairs I couldn't afford, and my mother's medication wasn't going to pay for itself. It was nearly noon when he walked in. I noticed the change in atmosphere before I saw him, the way conversation seemed to lower in volume, the way Margie's hand froze halfway to her coffee cup. The bell above the door chimed, and I turned, coffee pot still in hand. He stood in the doorway like he'd stepped out of a different world entirely. Everything about him spoke of money, the kind of wealth that didn't need to announce itself. His charcoal suit fit perfectly across broad shoulders, the fabric so fine it seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Dark hair, touched with silver at the temples, was swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble, sharp cheekbones, a jaw that looked like it had never softened for anyone, eyes so dark they appeared black in the diner's harsh lighting. But it wasn't just his appearance that made my breath catch, it was the way he moved, controlled, deliberate, like a predator who knew exactly how much space he occupied in the world. And behind him, through the glass door, I could see a black SUV idling at the curb, the silhouette of a driver visible through the tinted windshield. He chose a booth in the back corner. Not the one nearest the door, not the one by the window. The corner booth, where he could see both entrances and keep his back to the wall. I approached with my order pad, acutely aware of the coffee stain on my apron, the frayed hem of my uniform, the way my ponytail had started to come loose during the morning rush. "Coffee?" My voice came out steadier than I felt. He looked up, and for a moment those dark eyes fixed on me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. It wasn't the way men usually looked at me, with casual dismissal or uncomfortable hunger. This was different, assessing, calculating, like he could read every secret I'd ever kept just by looking at my face. "Black," he said. His voice was low, textured like expensive whiskey. "And whatever's good here." I almost laughed. Nothing was good here, but I nodded and scribbled something on my pad. "The meatloaf's fresh today, then I'll have that." I poured his coffee, hyper-aware of my trembling hands, praying I wouldn't spill. The cup clinked slightly against the saucer as I set it down. He didn't seem to notice, or if he did, he had the grace not to comment. As I turned to go, his phone rang. Not the cheerful chirp of a normal ringtone, but a sharp, business-like tone that made him tense almost imperceptibly. He answered in a language I didn't recognize. Italian, maybe, or something close to it. His voice, already commanding, took on an edge that sent a chill down my spine. I retreated to the kitchen, trying to shake off the unsettled feeling in my gut. "Who's the suit?" Margie asked when I clipped the order to the wheel. "No idea. But he's got a driver waiting outside." She peered through the service window, then quickly looked away. "Rich people slumming it. Probably saw us on some authentic experience food blog. She snorted. Just make sure he tips well. I brought out his meatloaf 20 minutes later. He'd been on his phone the entire time, speaking in that same clipped, authoritative tone. When I approached, he ended the call with a single word that sounded like a command. Anything else? I asked, setting down the plate. He looked at the food, then back at me. How long have you worked here? The question caught me off guard. 3 years. You like it? I wanted to laugh again. Like it. I hated every minute of it. But it paid for my mother's prescriptions and kept a roof, however leaky, over my head. It's a job. Something flickered in his expression. Not quite sympathy. Something darker, more complex. Honest answer. He ate slowly, methodically, like someone who'd learned to be cautious about everything, even food. I busied myself with other tables, but I could feel his gaze following me as I moved through the diner. It wasn't uncomfortable exactly, but it made me hyper-aware of every movement, every gesture. When he finished, I brought the check. $15.73. He pulled out a wallet, black leather, probably worth more than my entire month's salary, and withdrew a $50 bill. But as he set it on the table, his phone rang again. This time, whatever he heard made his entire demeanor change. The controlled calm evaporated, replaced by something cold and lethal. He stood abruptly, speaking rapid-fire into the phone as he headed for the door. The $50 bill remained on the table, but he'd forgotten to take his change. "Sir," I called after him, grabbing the money. "Your change." He was already outside, climbing into the SUV. The driver had the door open, engine running. I could hear urgent voices, see other men in dark suits through the tinted windows. I did something stupid. I ran after him. "Sir, wait!" The SUV was already pulling away from the curb when I reached it, slapping my palm against the dark window. Through the tinted glass, I saw him turn, saw his eyes widen slightly in surprise. The vehicle stopped. The window rolled down halfway. "Your change," I said breathlessly, holding out the $34.27. "You left." "Keep it." His voice was distracted, urgent. Someone was shouting something in the background of the SUV. "I can't. It's too much." He looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. Behind him, I could hear a man's voice, sharp and insistent. Something was very wrong. I could feel it in the air, in the tension radiating from the vehicle. "Please," I said, and I don't know why I added it. "Just take it back. I don't need charity." For 3 heartbeats, he stared at me. Then his hand reached through the window, not for the money, for my wrist. His grip was firm, warm, and sent an electric shock up my arm. "What's your name?" "Elena. Elena." He repeated it like he was memorizing it. "Keep the money and go back inside, now." There was something in his tone that brooked no argument, not a suggestion, an order. The window rolled up before I could respond, and the SUV pulled away, followed immediately by a second black vehicle I hadn't noticed before. They disappeared around the corner, leaving me standing on the curb with $34 in my hand and the strangest feeling that my life had just tilted off its axis. I walked back inside in a daze. "Did he tip?" Margie asked. I looked down at the money in my hand, then at the 50 still on the table. Yeah, he tipped. But it wasn't the money that haunted me for the rest of my shift. It was the way he'd said my name. The way his hand had felt around my wrist. The way those dark eyes had looked at me like I was something rare and valuable, instead of just another invisible waitress in a forgotten diner. That night, I lay in my cramped studio apartment, listening to the couple upstairs argue, and the traffic rumble by on the street below. I counted my money 3 times. The 50 from the table, the 34 from the change, and my own $18 that I'd planned to use for groceries, $102. It wouldn't solve my problems, but it would buy me a few more days. I fell asleep thinking about dark eyes, and a grip that felt like both a warning and a promise. The next morning started like any other. I woke to my alarm at 4:45 a.m., showered in the lukewarm water my building's ancient heater provided, and dressed in my spare uniform. The burned spot on my hand had started to heal, though it still twinged when I moved my fingers wrong. I was walking down the stairs of my building, coffee thermos in hand, when I noticed them. 5 black SUVs, parked in a perfect semicircle in front of my building. My heart stopped. Men in dark suits stood beside each vehicle, their postures too rigid to be casual. Waiting, the morning sun glinted off tinted windows and chrome fixtures. Neighbors were peering out from behind curtains, and Mrs. Chen from 2B was frozen on the sidewalk, grocery bags clutched to her chest. I stood on the bottom step, unable to move forward or retreat. One of the SUV doors opened. He stepped out. The same man from yesterday, but now I could see him clearly in the morning light. The sharp angles of his face, the way his suit fit like it had been sewn onto his body, the complete confidence in every movement. And behind him, at least a dozen men who moved with military precision, scanning the street, the buildings, every possible entrance and exit. His eyes found mine across the distance, and he smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a wolf who'd found what he'd been hunting. "Elena," he called, his voice carrying easily across the quiet morning street. "We need to talk." My legs wouldn't move. I stood frozen on that bottom step. Coffee thermos clutched so tightly in my hand that the plastic creaked. Every instinct screamed at me to run, back up the stairs into my apartment, lock the door and call. Who? The police? And tell them what? That a man who'd tipped me generously yesterday was now standing outside my building? But there was something about the way those SUVs were positioned, the way his men had spread out in a loose perimeter, that told me running was pointless. They'd anticipated every exit, every escape route. This wasn't chance. This was orchestrated. He walked toward me with that same predatory grace, his shoes, probably worth more than my car, clicking against the cracked pavement. The morning sun caught the silver at his temples, made his dark eyes gleam like polished stone. Behind him, one of his men spoke urgently into a phone, while 2 others flanked him at a respectful distance. "You're scared." He said it like an observation, not a question, stopping a few feet away, close enough that I could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle, cedar, and something darker. "Don't be." "Who are you?" My voice came out as a whisper. "My name is Dante Caruso." He tilted his head slightly, studying my face. "Does that mean anything to you?" It didn't. "Should it?" I shook my head mutely. Something flickered across his expression. Surprise, maybe, or satisfaction. "Good, that makes this simpler." He gestured toward the lead SUV. "Get in the car, Elena. I have to go to work." "No, you don't." The certainty in his voice made my stomach drop. "What did you do?" "I bought the diner." He said it casually, like he was discussing the weather. "As of 6 o'clock this morning, you no longer work there." The thermos slipped from my fingers, coffee splashing across the concrete. I stared at him, unable to process what I was hearing. You can't just..." "I can. I did." He stepped closer, and I instinctively backed up against the stair railing. He stopped immediately, hands visible at his sides in a gesture that might have been reassuring if everything else about this situation wasn't terrifying. "I'm not going to hurt you, Elena, but we need to talk, and it can't be here. Get in the car." "And if I refuse?" His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Then I'll have Marco pick you up and put you in the car, but I'd rather you chose to come willingly." I looked past him at the man he'd indicated. Marco, apparently, who stood beside the SUV like a marble statue in an expensive suit. He was massive, easily 6.5 feet tall, with the build of someone who broke things for a living. His face was impassive, but his eyes held the promise that he would absolutely follow through on Dante's threat without hesitation. "This is insane," I breathed. "Yes," Dante agreed, "but necessary. Please, Elena, I'm asking nicely." There was something in the way he said please, like the word was foreign to him, rarely used and deeply uncomfortable. Like he was offering me something precious by even pretending to request instead of command. I thought about screaming, about Mrs. Chen, still frozen on the sidewalk, about my neighbors watching from their windows. But what would that accomplish? these men wouldn't scatter at the sound of my voice. And something told me that Dante Caruso was a man accustomed to getting what he wanted, one way or another. My hand was shaking when I nodded. Relief crossed his features, so quick I almost missed it. He turned, gesturing to Marco, who immediately opened the rear door of the lead SUV. The interior was black leather and dark wood, spotless and smelling of expensive materials. Dante waited until I climbed in before sliding in beside me, maintaining a careful distance between us. The door closed with a solid final sound. "Drive," Dante said to the man in front. Not Marco, someone else with slate-gray eyes and a scar along his jaw. The estate. The convoy moved as one, pulling away from my building in perfect synchronization. I twisted in my seat, watching my apartment building disappear behind us, and felt like I was watching my entire life recede into the distance. "Where are we going?" I asked, hating how small my voice sounded. "Somewhere we can talk privately." Dante pulled out his phone, typing something with quick, efficient movements. "Somewhere safe." Safe from what? He looked at me then, really looked at me, and something in his expression made my blood run cold. "From the people who would use you to get to me." "I don't understand. I don't even know you. Yesterday was the first time I ever saw you." "I know." He set his phone down. "But you did something yesterday that changed everything. I gave you your change back. That's not—" "You touched my car." His voice was quiet, but there was an edge to it. "You ran after me, into the street, and put your hand on my window, in front of witnesses, in front of security cameras, in front of people who would very much like to find a weakness in my armor." The weight of his words settled over me like ice water. I was just trying to be honest. "I know. That's the problem." He leaned back against the leather seat, his profile sharp against the tinted window. "Do you know what I do, Elena?" "No." "Good. Let's keep it that way for now." He was quiet for a moment, watching the city slide past outside. "What I can tell you is that I'm a man with enemies, powerful enemies, and this morning, 3 separate sources sent me the same security footage. You, running after my car, touching it. Me, stopping to talk to you." My hands twisted in my lap. "So? So now they think you matter to me." He turned to look at me again, and whether that's true or not doesn't matter. The perception is enough. Which means you're in danger. This is crazy. I'm nobody. I'm just a waitress. You were a waitress. His correction was gentle but firm. Now you're someone who needs protection until I can fix this situation. The SUV turned onto a highway, accelerating smoothly. The other vehicles maintained their positions around us. 2 in front, 2 behind. A mobile fortress. "Fix it how?" I asked. "I'm still working that out." He pulled out his phone again as it buzzed. His expression darkened as he read whatever message had appeared. He typed a response, his fingers moving with barely controlled violence across the screen. Then he looked at me. "Do you have family? Anyone who might be targeted?" "My mother. Oh God, my mother. My mom," I whispered. "She's at Mercy General. She's been there for 3 weeks. Pneumonia complications." Dante was already dialing. "Marco, Mercy General, room number..." He looked at me. 347. "But, room 347. I want a full team there in 10 minutes. No one goes in or out without clearance. And I want Dr. Rashid on call. Have him review her file immediately." He ended the call and turned back to me. "She'll be protected, and she'll receive the best care available. I can't afford..." "I can." He said it simply, like money was an irrelevant detail. Maybe for him it was. Consider it an apology for disrupting your life. I wanted to argue, wanted to scream that he couldn't just swoop in and rearrange everything like pieces on a chessboard. But the thought of my mother, vulnerable in her hospital bed, made me swallow my pride. "Thank you," I managed. He nodded, already moving on. "You'll need clothes. Personal items. Make a list of anything you need from your apartment. I'll have someone retrieve it." "How long am I going to be wherever we're going?" "As long as it takes." His jaw tightened. "I have to identify who leaked that footage and neutralize the threat. Could be days, could be weeks. I can't just disappear, People will ask questions. My landlord is being paid 6 months' rent in advance as of 30 minutes ago. Dante checked his phone again. Your bills are handled. Your mother's hospital expenses are covered. You have nothing to worry about except staying safe. You can't just... I stopped, because apparently he could. He was doing it right now, dismantling my life and rebuilding it according to his specifications, all with a few phone calls and the unlimited resources of someone who clearly existed above normal rules. We drove for another 40 minutes, leaving the city behind. The landscape changed from urban sprawl to manicured suburbs to something else entirely. Rolling hills, iron gates, properties so large you couldn't see the houses from the road. Old money, real wealth, the kind that didn't need to prove anything. Finally, we turned onto a private road. The gates opened automatically as we approached. Massive things, black iron and gold accents, flanked by stone pillars. The driveway was easily 1/2 mile long, lined with ancient oak trees that formed a canopy overhead. Then the house came into view, and my breath caught. It wasn't a house. It was an estate. 3 stories of pale stone and tall windows, with wings that extended on either side, and architectural details that spoke of European influence. Manicured lawns stretched in every direction, punctuated by marble fountains and classical statuary. A separate building, probably a guest house, sat off to one side, and I could see what looked like stables in the distance. You live here? The words slipped out before I could stop them. When I'm in the country, Dante's tone was matter of fact. I have properties in New York, Milan, and Monaco, but this is home. The SUVs pulled up to the front entrance in formation. Before I could reach for the door handle, Marco was there, opening it with the efficiency of long practice. Dante exited on his side and came around to offer me his hand. I stared at it for a moment. Tanned skin, long fingers, a signet ring on his right pinky finger that probably had some family crest I didn't recognize. Then I took it, because refusing seemed childish, and let him help me out of the vehicle. His grip was firm, warm, and when I was standing on the crushed stone driveway, he didn't immediately let go. Welcome to Via Caruso, he said quietly. You'll be safe here. The front door opened, and a woman emerged, late 50s, gray hair pulled into an elegant bun, wearing a crisp black dress that spoke of professional service. Her sharp eyes took me in, cataloging my stained uniform and worn shoes in a single glance. Mrs. Chen will show you to your rooms, Dante said, releasing my hand. Get settled. Shower if you want. There are clothes in the closet that should fit you for now. I'll have a proper wardrobe arranged today. We'll talk more at dinner. He was already walking away, Marco and 2 other men falling into step behind him, speaking in rapid Italian. I watched him go. This stranger who'd just kidnapped me politely, bought out my life, and installed me in a mansion like I was some kind of princess in a fairy tale. Except fairy tales didn't usually involve organized crime and death threats. This way, miss. Mrs. Chen's voice was kind but professional. American, I noted with some relief, despite sharing a name with my neighbor. I'll show you to the East Wing. I followed her through doors that probably cost more than my yearly salary, into a foyer with marble floors and a ceiling 3 stories high. A massive chandelier hung overhead, crystal catching the light from tall windows. Artwork that looked museum quality lined the walls. A curved staircase swept upward, the banister gleaming dark wood. My sneakers squeaked against the marble. Mrs. Chen led me up the stairs, down a hallway with thick carpet that muffled our footsteps, and finally to a set of double doors. She opened them to reveal a suite that was larger than my entire apartment. The bedroom was decorated in soft creams and golds, with a 4-poster bed that looked like it belonged in a palace. French doors opened onto a private balcony overlooking the grounds. There was a sitting area with a fireplace, a writing desk, and fresh flowers in crystal vases. The bathroom is through there. Mrs. Chen indicated a door to the left. You'll find toiletries and everything you might need. The closet has been stocked with basics in your size. Mr. Caruso is very thorough. If you need anything at all, there's a phone on the nightstand. Dial 0 for the main house, or you can press the call button and someone will come immediately. Thank you, I managed. She paused at the door, her expression softening slightly. He's not a bad man, miss. Dangerous, yes. Complicated, certainly, but not bad. "You're safe here. Try to remember that." Then she was gone, closing the doors softly behind her. I stood alone in that beautiful room, still wearing my stained uniform and worn sneakers, and finally let myself feel the full weight of what had just happened. Yesterday I'd been nobody, invisible, a waitress whose biggest worry was making rent. Today, I was a prisoner in a palace, protected by a man whose name I barely knew, but whose enemies apparently thought I mattered enough to threaten. I walked to the French doors and stepped out onto the balcony. The ground stretched out before me, perfect lawns, sculpted gardens, and in the distance the iron gates that separated this world from reality. Beautiful, isolated, a gilded cage. I thought about the way Dante had said my name, the way his hand had felt around my wrist yesterday, the intensity in his dark eyes when he'd promised I'd be safe, and I wondered what price I'd eventually have to pay for that safety. I didn't mean to fall asleep. The shower had been my undoing. Endless hot water, water pressure that actually worked, soap that smelled like lavender, and something else expensive I couldn't name. I'd stood under the spray until my skin turned pink, washing away the diner grease and the terror of the morning, and emerged feeling like a different person. The towels were Egyptian cotton, thick and soft. The robe hanging on the back of the door fit perfectly. When I'd opened the closet, I'd found exactly what Mrs. Chen had promised. Clothes in my size, still bearing designer tags that made my eyes water. Casual wear, business attire, even evening gowns. Someone had studied me carefully enough to know my measurements down to the inch. That should have terrified me more than it did. I'd pulled on a simple pair of black leggings and an oversized cashmere sweater. Tags read $340, more than I made in a week, and sat on the bed for just a moment. Just to think, just to process. The mattress had been like lying on a cloud. Now I woke to twilight filtering through the French doors and a soft knock at my bedroom entrance. "Miss Elena?" A young woman's voice, accented, Eastern European maybe. "Mr. Caruso asks that you join him for dinner in 30 minutes. I sat up, disoriented, my hair still damp against my neck. "Okay, thank you." Footsteps retreated down the hallway. I found a hairbrush on the vanity, silver-backed, probably antique, and worked through the tangles in my hair. My reflection looked strange in the ornate mirror. Same face, same green eyes, same freckles across my nose. But the setting was all wrong. I didn't belong in this room, wearing these clothes, about to have dinner with a man who'd casually mentioned owning properties in 3 countries. The young woman, Katya, she introduced herself when I emerged, led me back through the labyrinth of hallways. The house had come alive as evening fell. Soft lighting illuminated the artwork. I could hear voices somewhere in the distance, speaking Italian. Through windows, I glimpsed the grounds transformed by landscape lighting, everything golden and surreal. Katya stopped at a door, knocked once, and opened it. The dining room was smaller than I had expected. Intimate, really, though the table could easily seat 12, but only 2 places were set. One at the head, and one to the right. Crystal gleamed in candlelight. More flowers, white roses this time, perfumed the air. Dante stood by the windows, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in rapid Italian that sounded like threats wrapped in silk. He'd changed into dark slacks and a white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms corded with muscle, and what looked like the edge of a tattoo disappearing under the fabric. He saw me, and held up one finger. 1 minute. Then he said something sharp into the phone, and ended the call. "Elena." He gestured to the chair. "Please, sit. I hope you rested well." I didn't mean to sleep. I moved to the chair he'd indicated, hyper-aware of his proximity as he pulled it out for me. His cologne filled my senses again. Cedar and danger. "What time is it?" "Nearly 7. He took his seat at the head of the table, close enough that I could have reached out and touched him. "You needed the rest. It's been a stressful day." A door opened and staff appeared. 2 young men in crisp white jackets, carrying covered dishes. They served us with practiced efficiency. Roasted chicken with herbs, vegetables that looked like they'd come from a garden minutes ago, bread still warm from the oven, wine, red, expensive, poured into glasses that probably cost more than my security deposit. When we were alone again, Dante raised his glass slightly, 2 unexpected complications. I didn't drink. Is that what I am? A complication? The most interesting kind, he sipped, watching me over the rim. Your mother is doing better, by the way. Dr. Rashid examined her this afternoon. He's adjusting her medications and expects significant improvement within 48 hours. Relief flooded through me so intensely I had to blink back tears. Thank you. Really. I don't know how to— Don't thank me yet. He set down his glass. Eat, please. Mrs. Chen will be offended if you don't, and she's terrifying when she's offended. I picked up my fork, suddenly ravenous. The food was extraordinary, nothing like the greasy diner fare I was used to. Can I ask you something? You can ask. I may not answer. Why did you really come to the diner yesterday? His expression shifted, something dark moving behind his eyes. I was supposed to meet someone there, a contact who had information I needed. He never showed. What kind of information? The kind that gets people killed. He cut into his chicken with precise movements. Someone in my organization has been selling secrets. Locations, shipment details, security protocols. 3 of my men have died in the past month because someone told my enemies exactly where they'd be. The food turned to ash in my mouth. You think it's someone close to you. I know it is. The question is who? He was quiet for a moment, and I saw something bleak cross his features. My father built this organization on loyalty. Family first, always. I've tried to honor that. But someone has decided money matters more than blood. The contact who didn't show up was found dead in his apartment 2 hours after I left the diner. Someone got to him first. Dante's jaw tightened, and someone made sure there were cameras recording my every move yesterday, including you chasing after my car like I mattered to you. I was returning your change. I know, but perception is reality in my world, Elena, and now certain people believe you're important to me. Which makes you a target, which means I'm responsible for keeping you alive. I set down my fork, appetite gone. How do you live like this? Always looking over your shoulder, never trusting anyone? Carefully. He leaned back in his chair, studying me with that unnerving intensity. And alone, mostly. It's safer that way. That sounds lonely. Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe, that I'd name it so plainly. It is. But loneliness doesn't kill you. Misplaced trust does. We ate in silence for a few minutes. I tried to process everything he'd told me, tried to reconcile the dangerous man he described with the one who'd made sure my mother received the best medical care, who'd bought me clothes and given me a palace room and was now sitting across from me looking almost human. Can I ask you something else? I ventured. A slight smile touched his lips. You're very bold for someone in your position. What position is that? Prisoner? Guest? Human shield? The smile widened, reaching his eyes for the first time. It transformed his face, made him look younger, less dangerous. Guest. Definitely guest. Prisoners don't get the East Wing. Where do prisoners get? The wine cellar. It's quite secure. Also cold. You'd hate it. He was teasing me, I realized. This man who ordered people around like chess pieces, who'd bought a diner without blinking, who lived surrounded by armed guards. He was teasing me. I'll try to stay on your good side, then. Please do. The humor faded from his expression. What did you want to ask? The tattoo on your arm. What is it? He glanced down at his forearm, where the edge of dark ink was visible beneath his rolled sleeve. For a moment, I thought he wouldn't answer. Then he pushed the sleeve up higher, revealing an intricate design. A crow in flight, wings spread, carrying something in its talons that looked like a key. Family crest, he said quietly. Every Caruso male gets it on his 18th birthday. The crow represents wisdom and adaptability. The key represents the secrets we keep and the doors we can open. His fingers traced the design absently. My father gave me this, held my hand while the artist worked, even though I was trying not to show how much it hurt. There was something raw in his voice. Something that made me realize this wasn't just ink. It was identity. Legacy. Burden. He's gone? I asked softly. 5 years ago. Heart attack. Dante rolled his sleeve back down, the vulnerability disappearing with it. He was a hard man, but fair. Everyone feared him, but they also respected him. I've spent 5 years trying to fill shoes that were always too big. I think you're doing better than you realize. He looked at me sharply. What makes you say that? You bought a diner to protect a waitress you don't know. You're making sure my mother gets treatment she couldn't afford. You could have just hidden me somewhere, but instead you're trying to solve the actual problem. I met his gaze. A truly bad man wouldn't bother with any of that. For a long moment, he just stared at me. Then he reached across the table, his hand covering mine where it rested beside my plate. His skin was warm, his grip gentle but firm. You have no idea how dangerous I can be, Elena. Maybe not. But I know you could have hurt me a dozen times today, and you haven't. I know you keep your word. You said my mother would be safe, and she is. I know. I hesitated, then forged ahead. I know what it's like to be alone, even when you're surrounded by people, and I think maybe you do too. His thumb moved slowly across my knuckles, a gesture that sent electricity up my arm. His dark eyes had gone intense again, but different this time. Not calculating or assessing, something else. Something that made my breath catch. You should be afraid of me, he said quietly. I know, but I'm not. Not really. Not anymore. The dinner staff chose that moment to return, clearing plates and bringing dessert, tiramisu that looked like art on delicate china. Dante released my hand slowly, reluctantly, and the loss of his touch felt like cold water. We finished the meal making small talk. He asked about my mother, about my life before the diner, about the degree I'd started but never finished when the money ran out. I asked carefully neutral questions about the estate, about Mrs. Chen, about the art collection I'd glimpsed in the hallways. But underneath the polite conversation, something had shifted. Every time his eyes met mine, I felt it. A pull, magnetic and undeniable. When he laughed at something I said, the sound did strange things to my heartbeat. When his hand brushed mine reaching for his wine glass, sparks seemed to dance across my skin. This was dangerous. More dangerous than his enemies, maybe. After dinner, he walked me back to my room, Marco and another guard maintaining a discreet distance behind us. The house was quieter now, most of the staff gone for the evening. Our footsteps echoed softly against marble and hardwood. I have meetings tomorrow, Dante said as we reached my door. Business that can't be postponed. You'll be safe here. The estate has security systems that would make Fort Knox jealous, and Marco will be outside your door all night. I'm not going anywhere. I looked up at him, acutely aware of how close we were standing. Though I should probably call my landlord, explain. Already handled. You're on an extended family emergency. Your apartment is secure, rent paid, utilities transferred to autopay. He smiled slightly at my expression. I told you. I'm thorough. Control freak is more accurate, that too. He reached out, and for a heartbeat I thought he was going to touch my face. Instead, he opened my door, holding it for me. Sleep well, Elena. Tomorrow we start figuring out how to get your life back. I stepped into my room, then turned back. Dante? Yes? Thank you. For even everything. The parts that are completely insane. That smile again, the one that made him look almost human. You're welcome. Even though this is definitely completely insane. I closed the door and leaned against it, listening to his footsteps retreat down the hallway. My heart was racing, my skin still tingling from the memory of his hand on mine. This was a mistake. Getting attached to him, to any of this, was the worst possible idea. But as I changed into the silk pajamas someone had left folded on the bed, as I slipped between sheets that felt like water against my skin, I couldn't stop thinking about dark eyes and careful hands and the loneliness I'd heard in his voice when he talked about his father. I fell asleep imagining what it would feel like to be kissed by a man like Dante Caruso. Dangerous thoughts for a dangerous situation, but I'd stopped being able to control them. Somewhere in the night, I woke to voices outside my door. Marco speaking Italian to someone, the words too low to make out. I heard Dante's voice respond, firm and commanding, and then silence. I wondered if he slept at all, or if he spent his nights planning, strategizing, trying to stay 3 steps ahead of enemies who wanted him dead. I wondered if he was thinking about me. And I wondered what would happen when this was over, when the threat was neutralized and I was no longer his responsibility. The thought of going back to my tiny apartment, my stained uniform, my invisible existence suddenly felt unbearable. But this palace, this protection, this dangerous man with the careful hands, wasn't real, couldn't be real, not for someone like me. I pulled the covers up to my chin and told myself to stop dreaming. Reality would come soon enough. 3 days passed like a fever dream. I woke each morning to breakfast brought to my room by Katya, fresh pastries, fruit, coffee that tasted like heaven. I'd eat on the balcony, watching the grounds come alive with staff tending the gardens, security teams changing shifts, the occasional sleek car arriving or departing through the iron gates. Dante was a ghost during daylight hours, gone before I woke, returning late. But he always joined me for dinner, appearing in the small dining room with his sleeves rolled up and shadows under his eyes, bringing news of my mother's improving condition and carefully neutral conversation that never quite touched on the real question between us. On the 4th morning, everything changed. I was in the library, a 2-story room with floor-to-ceiling shelves and a rolling ladder that belonged in a movie, when Dante found me. I heard his footsteps on the marble floor before I saw him, that distinctive, confident stride that made my pulse quicken despite my best efforts. Reading? He appeared in the doorway, and I was struck again by how the afternoon light seemed to sharpen his features, make him look both more dangerous and more beautiful. I held up the book, Pride and Prejudice, because apparently I was a cliché. Your collection is impressive. First editions? My mother's, actually. He moved into the room, running his fingers along a shelf with something like reverence. She died when I was 12, cancer. My father kept everything exactly as she left it. I'm sorry. She would have liked you. He turned to face me fully, and something in his expression made my stomach flip. She believed in honesty above everything else. Said my father's world was built on lies and secrets, but at least our family could tell each other the truth. Did you? Tell each other the truth? When she was alive, yes. After... He shrugged. My father and I communicated in tactics and strategy. Truths became dangerous. I set down the book, tucking my legs under me on the leather armchair. Why are you telling me this? Because I found the leak. His voice went cold. And because what I'm about to do is going to change everything, and I need you to understand why. My heart started pounding. Who is it? My cousin. Luca. He said the name like it tasted bitter. We grew up together. My father treated him like a second son after his parents died. I trusted him with my life. His jaw clenched. Turns out he's been selling information to the Vitelli family for the past 8 months. The contact who died? Luca had him killed to protect his own identity. Oh God. Dante, he confessed this morning. My men found evidence in his apartment. Burner phones, account statements, communications. Dante's hands curled into fists. 3 good men are dead because Luca wanted money to fund his gambling debts. I stood, crossing to him without thinking. What are you going to do? His eyes met mine, and what I saw there made me shiver. What my father would have done, what the rules demand. He betrayed the family. There's only one punishment for that. You're going to kill him. I have to. No hesitation. No doubt. If I don't, I look weak. Others will think they can betray me without consequences. The organization will fracture. More people will die. But he's your family. He stopped being family when he chose money over blood. Dante's voice was hard, inflectionless. This is my world, Elena. This is what I am. I wanted you to see it clearly before. He stopped, looked away. Before what? Before you decide whether you can live with it. The weight of that statement hung between us. I understood what he wasn't saying. That these 3 days had been a test for both of us. That whatever was building between us, this careful attraction and unexpected understanding, would die if I couldn't accept the darkness that came with him. I thought about my mother, recovering in a hospital room guarded by his men. About the diner I'd hated, now owned by him. About my tiny apartment and my invisible life, and the way I'd felt nothing but numb for so long until dark eyes had looked at me like I mattered. When? I asked quietly. His head snapped back to me. Tonight. After sunset. Will I see you after? Something raw crossed his face. Do you want to? I stepped closer, close enough to smell cedar and feel the heat radiating from his body. Yes. His hand came up slowly, cupping my cheek with a gentleness that contradicted everything he'd just said about violence and death. You should run from me, Elena. You should be horrified. I know. I leaned into his touch, but I'm not. For 3 heartbeats, we stood frozen. Then he lowered his head, his forehead resting against mine, his breath warm against my lips. This is a mistake, he whispered. Probably. I can't give you normal. I can't give you safe. I never asked for either. His thumb traced my cheekbone. What do you want? The truth came out before I could stop it. You. Whatever version of you is real, even the dark parts, maybe especially those. He pulled back just enough to look at me, and what I saw in his eyes made my knees weak. Desire, yes, but also something deeper, something that looked like salvation and damnation wrapped together. After tonight, he said, his voice rough, things can't go back to the way they were. Do you understand? If I do this, if I cross this line with you, I won't be able to let you go. Then don't. He kissed me like a drowning man finding air. His mouth was hot and demanding, one hand threading through my hair while the other pressed against my lower back, pulling me flush against him. I gasped, and he deepened the kiss, tasting like coffee and something darker. Something that should have terrified me, but instead made me press closer. My hands found his chest, feeling the rapid hammer of his heartbeat beneath expensive fabric. He made a sound low in his throat, almost a growl, and suddenly my back was against the bookshelf, first editions digging into my spine, and I didn't care because his body was covering mine and his hands were everywhere, and nothing had ever felt more right. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his eyes were nearly black. I have to go, he said, but he didn't move. I have to handle this. I know. Wait for me. Please. I'll come to you when it's done. I nodded, unable to speak past the emotion clogging my throat. He kissed me again, softer this time, almost reverent. Then he stepped back, straightening his clothes with hands that weren't quite steady. Lock your door tonight, he said. Don't open it for anyone but me. Then he was gone, and I was alone in the library, lips swollen and heart racing, wondering what I'd just agreed to. The afternoon stretched into evening. I tried to read, couldn't focus. Tried to nap, couldn't sleep. Finally, I showered and changed into one of the dresses from the closet. Simple, black, fitted. I didn't know why I was dressing up, maybe because I knew tonight would change everything. Katya brought dinner to my room. I'd asked not to eat alone in the dining room. She set up the tray with her usual efficiency, but her eyes were worried. Big trouble tonight, she said softly. Everyone is scared. I know. Mr. Caruso, he is good man, but sometimes good men must do bad things. She touched my hand briefly. You make him happy. I see it. First time in long time he smiles real smile. After she left, I picked at the food and watched darkness fall over the grounds. Lights came on across the estate. I saw vehicles arriving, men in dark suits gathering near what looked like a garage or warehouse in the distance. I thought about Luca, whoever he was, about the betrayal that had cost 3 lives, about Dante, preparing to execute his own cousin to maintain order in a world I barely understood. And I thought about the way he'd kissed me like I was oxygen, and he was suffocating. Around midnight, I heard it. A single gunshot, distant but unmistakable, echoing across the grounds. Then, silence. I sat on the edge of the bed, hands clasped in my lap, waiting. An hour passed. 2. The house settled into its nighttime rhythms. Creaking wood, distant voices, the hum of security systems. Finally, footsteps in the hallway. A soft knock at my door. Elena. Dante's voice rough and strained. It's me. I opened the door. He stood in the hallway, still in the same clothes from earlier, but now there was blood on his sleeve. Not a lot, just a few spatters. His face was pale, his eyes hollow. It's done, he said simply. I stepped back, letting him in. He moved past me like he was carrying the weight of the world, walking to the French doors and staring out at the dark grounds. "Are you okay?" I asked. "No." He didn't turn around. "I just killed a man I loved like a brother. I'll never be okay again." I went to him, wrapping my arms around him from behind, pressing my cheek against his back. He was trembling, barely perceptible, but I felt it. "He made his choice," I said softly. "You made yours. You protected your family by destroying it." His voice cracked. "My father always said leadership means making impossible choices." I never understood until tonight what that really meant. "You're not alone in this." He turned in my arms, pulling me against his chest, his face buried in my hair. "I don't deserve you. I don't deserve anything good. Maybe not. But you have me anyway." We stood like that for a long time, his heart gradually slowing against mine, his breathing evening out. When he finally pulled back, his eyes were red but dry. "I need to tell you something," he said. "About why I'm really protecting you." "I know why. The footage, the enemies. That's part of it, but not all." He took my hands in his. "The man your ex-boyfriend stole from? The one whose drugs he sold and whose money he gambled away?" My blood went cold. "How do you know about Marcus?" "Because that man was me, Elena. Your piece of shit ex stole from my organization 6 months ago, 50,000 in product, another 30,000 in cash. I've been looking for him ever since." The room tilted. "What?" "When I saw you at the diner, I didn't recognize you at first, but then you told me your name, and I remembered. Marcus Chen had a girlfriend named Elena. I had my men pull your file." He squeezed my hands. "You didn't know what he was doing. My investigators confirmed that. You were clean, but technically, you're connected to someone who owes me money and product. So this whole thing, the protection, my mother, everything, it's because you think I can lead you to Marcus?" "No." His grip tightened. "It's because when I realized who you were, I also realized you were an innocent caught in someone else's mess, just like you're an innocent caught in my mess now. And because the moment you ran after my car, risking your own safety to return $34, I knew you were different from anyone I'd ever met. Where is Marcus now? Dead. My men found him in Atlantic City 2 months ago. He picked the wrong card game to cheat at." Dante's expression was grim, "But you didn't know that. And I didn't tell you because I was afraid you'd think that's the only reason I kept you here." I pulled my hands free, needing space to think. "Is it?" "No, Christ, no." He ran his hands through his hair, frustration and something like desperation in his eyes. "I kept you here because you're in danger. I bought the diner because I didn't want you going back to that life. I'm telling you the truth now, because I can't stand the idea of you not knowing everything. You should have told me sooner. I know, I'm sorry." He stepped closer but didn't touch me. "I'm telling you now. All of it. The truth about Marcus, about Luca, about what I am and what I do. You deserve to make your choice with full information. And what choice is that?" His jaw tightened. "Whether you stay or go. Whether you can accept me, knowing everything. Whether you can live in my world with all its darkness and blood and impossible choices." I looked at him. This man who'd killed tonight, who'd lied by omission, who lived in a palace surrounded by violence and danger. And I saw also the man who'd held my hand at dinner, who'd made sure my mother received the best care, who'd kissed me like I was precious and trembled in my arms when the weight of leadership became too much. "I'm not going anywhere," I said. Relief and something like anguish crossed his face. "Elena, I'm not naive, Dante. I know what you are. I know what this world is, and I'm choosing it anyway. I'm choosing you." He crossed the distance between us in 2 strides, cupping my face in both hands. "I will protect you with everything I have. I swear it. No one will ever hurt you. I know. And I will try. Every day I will try to be worthy of this choice you're making. I know that too." He kissed me then, and it was different from the library. Slower, deeper, weighted with promise and possession. When he lifted me, I wrapped my legs around his waist, and he carried me to the bed, laying me down like I was made of glass. "Tell me to stop." He breathed against my neck. "Tell me this is too fast, too much, and I'll walk away." "Don't you dare." His laugh was rough, almost broken. "You're going to destroy me, Elena. Good. Then we'll be even." We fell into each other like drowning, like salvation, like two people who'd been searching for something they didn't know they needed until they found it. His hands learned my body with the same thoroughness he applied to everything else, mapping every curve and hollow, finding places that made me gasp and arch against him. I explored the planes of his chest, the muscles of his back, the tattoo of the crow that marked him as a Caruso. When he finally moved inside me, his eyes locked on mine, I felt something shift in my chest, something that felt like coming home and jumping off a cliff at the same time. "Mine," he whispered against my lips. "Say it." "Yours." Again. "Yours, Dante. Always yours." He shuddered, burying his face in my neck, and we moved together until the world narrowed to just this, skin and heat, and the merging of two damaged souls into something that might, against all odds, be whole. Afterward, we lay tangled in silk sheets, my head on his chest, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on my bare shoulder. "What happens now?" I asked quietly. "Now I make this official. You're mine, Elena, under my protection permanently. Anyone who wants to hurt you goes through me first." His arm tightened around me, and I start planning our future. Future? "You think I'd do this, claim you like this, and let you go?" His voice was rough with possession. "You're mine now. In my world, that's forever." I should have been terrified, should have felt trapped. Instead, I felt safe. Morning came softly, filtering through the French doors in bands of gold and amber. I woke wrapped in warmth, Dante's arm across my waist, his chest pressed against my back, his breath steady against my neck. For a moment, I lay perfectly still, afraid that moving would shatter whatever spell had been cast in the darkness. But then he stirred, his lips brushing my shoulder, and I felt him smile against my skin. "You're awake," he murmured. "So are you." "I don't sleep much. Habit." His hand splayed across my stomach, possessive even in gentleness. "But watching you sleep, that was peaceful." I turned in his arms to face him. Morning light made his features softer, the harsh edges smoothed by satisfaction, and something that looked almost like contentment. The shadows under his eyes were still there, but the haunted look from last night had faded. "No regrets?" I asked. "Only that I didn't find you sooner." He kissed my forehead, my nose, my lips. "Stay here. I need to make some calls, handle some business. Then we're going to see your mother." "We? Did you think I'd let you go alone?" His expression turned serious. "You're mine now, Elena. Where you go, I go, and everyone needs to see that you're under my protection." He rose from the bed unself-consciously, and I watched him dress with the same efficient grace he applied to everything: tailored pants, crisp white shirt, the shoulder holster he strapped on without fanfare. The gun nestled against his ribs was a stark reminder of his reality. Our reality now. "I'll have Katya bring you breakfast," he said, shrugging into his jacket. "We leave in 2 hours." After he left, I showered and dressed carefully in clothes that felt like armor: tailored black pants, a silk blouse, heels that actually fit. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. Same face, but different eyes. Eyes that had seen violence and chosen to stay anyway. The drive to Mercy General was nothing like my first journey in Dante's convoy. This time, I sat beside him in the back of the SUV, his hand clasped firmly around mine, while Marco drove and 2 other vehicles flanked us. He made phone calls in rapid Italian, discussing things I didn't understand, but his thumb never stopped moving in circles against my palm, an unconscious gesture of connection. The hospital staff's reaction when we arrived told me everything I needed to know about Dante's reach. The front entrance had been cleared. Security guards I didn't recognize stood at strategic points. A doctor I'd never seen before, Dr. Rashid presumably, was waiting in the lobby, greeting Dante with deference that bordered on fear. "Mr. Caruso, everything is prepared. Mrs. Volkov is in the private wing now as you requested. Her condition? Remarkable improvement. The new medication protocol is working perfectly. I expect full recovery within the week." Dante nodded, his hand at the small of my back, guiding me toward the elevators. Marco and another guard fell into step behind us. My mother's new room was on the top floor, private, spacious, with windows overlooking the city and equipment that looked like it belonged in a different hospital entirely. She was sitting up in bed, color in her cheeks for the first time in weeks, looking more alert than I'd seen her in months. "Elena." Her face lit up when she saw me, then confusion clouded her features as she took in Dante, the guards, the entire surreal situation. "What's going on? The doctors won't tell me anything except that my treatment has been upgraded?" I crossed to her bed, taking her hand. "Mom, there's a lot to explain." "Start with him." She pointed at Dante, who'd remained by the door, giving us space. "Who is he? And why does he look like he owns the hospital? Because he might," I said honestly. "Mom, this is Dante Caruso. He's the reason you're getting better. And I looked back at him, finding his dark eyes steady on mine. "He's mine." My mother's eyes widened. "Yours? Elena, what happened? Last week you were serving eggs at that diner, and now you're walking in here with armed guards and a man who looks like he stepped out of a Mafia movie." She stopped, face paling. "Oh, God. Please tell me he didn't step out of a Mafia movie." "I can't tell you that," I admitted. "But I can tell you he's kept me safe. He's taking care of you, and I trust him with my life." She studied Dante with the shrewd assessment that had helped her survive 40 years of bad choices and hard luck. "You hurt my daughter, and I don't care how many guards you have. I will find a way to make you suffer." Dante's lips twitched. "I believe you, Mrs. Volkov, and I give you my word. Elena's safety and happiness are my highest priority. See that it stays that way." She squeezed my hand. "Now someone tell me what the hell is really going on." We stayed for an hour. I explained as much as I could without terrifying her, leaving out Luca's execution, Marcus's connection, the real depth of danger I'd been in. Dante added details about her treatment plan, the security measures in place, the arrangements he'd made for her recovery and rehabilitation. My mother listened, asked sharp questions, and finally nodded. "So my daughter is dating a crime lord who saved my life and is apparently in love with her, judging by the way he looks at her when she's not watching." Dante didn't deny it. "Could be worse," she said dryly. "Could be Marcus." I laughed, surprising myself. "Definitely better than Marcus." As we were leaving, my mother called out, "Mr. Caruso?" He turned back. "Yes?" "Thank you. For my daughter. For me. For giving us both a second chance." Her voice softened. "She's all I have in this world. Please remember that." "I will," he promised. "I swear it." In the elevator, Dante pulled me against his chest. "Your mother is formidable. You have no idea. I like her." He kissed the top of my head. "She raised you. That alone makes her remarkable." The next stop surprised me, a lawyer's office in a gleaming downtown high-rise. Dante led me into a conference room where an older man with silver hair and an expensive suit waited with stacks of paperwork. "Elena, this is Robert Chen, my attorney. Robert, this is Elena Volkov, my—" He paused, and I saw him searching for the right word. "My future wife." The room spun. "What?" Dante turned to me, taking both my hands. "I told you last night. In my world, when I claim someone, it's forever. I want to make it legal, protected. I want everyone to know you're mine. And I'm yours. We've known each other less than a week." "I know. And I don't care." His grip tightened. "I've spent my entire life making calculated decisions, Elena. Safe choices, strategic moves. And what did it get me? A cousin who betrayed me, an organization full of people who fear me but don't trust me, a house full of beautiful things and absolute loneliness." His voice dropped. "And then you ran after my car for $34 and everything changed. You're the first real thing I've had in years. I'm not letting you go." Robert cleared his throat diplomatically. "Perhaps the young lady would like to review the prenuptial agreement first." "There is no prenup," Dante said flatly. "What's mine is hers, all of it." "Dante, that's insane," Robert started. "Non-negotiable." Dante's tone could have cut glass. "Draw up the papers. Marriage license, power of attorney, everything. I want her legally protected. If something happens to me, she gets everything. The estate, the businesses, the offshore accounts, all of it. I stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. You're serious. Completely. He cupped my face. Marry me, Elena. Not because you have to, not because I'm protecting you, but because in less than a week, you've become more important to me than anything else in this world. Because when I think about my future, you're in every part of it. Because... His voice roughened. Because I love you, and I need you to know that if I die tomorrow, you'll be taken care of forever. Tears blurred my vision. That's the most romantic and terrifying proposal I've ever heard. Is that a yes? I thought about my tiny apartment, and my stained uniform, and the numbness that had defined my existence for so long. I thought about dark eyes and careful hands, and the way he'd trembled in my arms when the weight of his choices became too heavy. I thought about passion and danger, and the kind of love that didn't make sense, but felt more real than anything I'd ever known. Yes, I whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. He kissed me like he was sealing a contract written in blood and promises. And maybe he was. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Dante had been right about one thing. Once I was publicly identified as his, the threats evaporated. His enemies understood that touching me meant war with the Caruso family, and apparently, that was a war no one wanted. My mother was released from the hospital, stronger than she'd been in years, and moved into a guest house on the estate. She and Mrs. Chen became unlikely friends, bonding over their shared exasperation with Dante's overprotective tendencies. The wedding was small, immediate family only, which for Dante meant the key members of his organization. I wore a dress that cost more than a car, simple white silk that made me feel like a princess. Dante wore a tuxedo that fit him like sin, and when he saw me walking down the aisle of the estate's private chapel, I saw his composure crack just for a moment, just enough to show me the man beneath the armor. We exchanged vows in Italian and English, rings that bore the Caruso crest, and a kiss that promised forever. The reception was elegant chaos. Music, dancing, food that probably cost more than my yearly salary at the diner. I met family members who eyed me with everything from curiosity to suspicion. I shook hands with men whose names I recognized from news reports about organized crime. I smiled and played the part of the Mafia wife, all while Dante's hand stayed firmly on my lower back, a constant reminder of his presence and protection. Late in the evening, he pulled me away from the party, leading me through darkened hallways to his study. Our study now, he'd insisted. He closed the door, muffling the sounds of celebration, and pulled me into his arms. Happy? He asked, terrified, exhilarated, confused about how this is my life now. I looked up at him. But yes, happy, good. He kissed my forehead. Because I have a wedding present for you. He handed me a folder. Inside were property deeds, business licenses, and a photograph of the diner, my diner, the one where we'd met. I'm signing it over to you, Dante said. Full ownership. Do whatever you want with it. Renovate it, sell it, turn it into something new. But it's yours. Your choice. Your independence. Fresh tears stung my eyes. You're giving me the diner? I'm giving you options. I never want you to feel trapped, Elena. Not by me. Not by this life. You chose to stay, but I need you to know you can always choose differently. I won't. Maybe not. But knowing you could, that makes your choice to stay mean everything. He pulled out another document. And this is for your mother. A trust fund. Medical care for life, living expenses, everything she needs. She's family now. We take care of family. I couldn't speak past the emotion clogging my throat, so I kissed him instead, pouring every ounce of love and gratitude and wonder into it. When we finally rejoined the party, I felt different, not just married, but transformed. The invisible waitress was gone. In her place was someone new, someone who'd chosen danger and passion, and a love that defied logic, someone who belonged. Months passed. I learned the rhythms of Dante's world, the late-night phone calls, the security protocols, the careful dance of power and diplomacy. I learned which families were allies and which were rivals. I learned to shoot, because Dante insisted, and discovered I had a natural aim that made Marco grudgingly impressed. I also learned about the legitimate businesses, the real estate holdings, the investment portfolios, the charitable foundations. Dante had been slowly transitioning the organization away from its criminal roots, building something that could be passed down to future generations without the constant threat of violence. "My father's world is dying," he told me one night as we lay in bed, my head on his chest. "The old ways don't work anymore. I want to build something different, something our children won't be ashamed of." "Children?" I raised my head to look at him. His hand moved to my still flat stomach, possessive and tender. "Someday, when things are safer, when I've finished what I started." He met my eyes. "Would you want that? Children, a family? With you?" "Yes." 2 years later, I stood in the same private chapel, holding our daughter, Sophia, named for Dante's mother. She had his dark eyes and my smile, and when he held her, I saw a softness in him that the world would never witness. My mother, healthy and vibrant, bounced her granddaughter on her knee while Mrs. Chen fussed over Sophia's christening gown. Marco improbably had become the baby's favorite person, his stern face breaking into rare smiles when she grabbed his finger. The diner had been transformed into a community center, job training, GED programs, resources for people like I'd been. Invisible people who needed someone to see them. I ran it with the same thoroughness Dante applied to his empire, and he'd never been prouder. The threats hadn't disappeared entirely. There were still enemies, still dangers, still nights when Dante came home with shadows in his eyes and blood he couldn't quite wash away. But we'd built something strong enough to weather those storms, trust and love, and the bone-deep knowledge that we'd chosen each other, fully and completely. That evening, after Sophia was asleep and the guests had gone, Dante found me on our bedroom balcony, looking out over the grounds that had once seemed like a prison and now felt like home. "Regrets?" he asked, echoing that first morning. "Not even one." He wrapped his arms around me from behind, and we stood there as darkness fell over the estate, over our life, over the future we were building together. I thought about the girl I'd been, tired, invisible, serving coffee to people who never saw her. I thought about $18 in my checking account, and the desperation that had made returning $34 seem like a moral imperative. I thought about how a single choice, running after a stranger's car, had changed absolutely everything. "Thank you," I whispered. "For what?" "For seeing me, for choosing me, for giving me a life I never imagined I could have." He turned me in his arms, his dark eyes soft with the love he no longer bothered to hide. "You gave me something far more valuable, Elena. You gave me a reason to be better than what I was. A reason to build instead of destroy. A reason to believe that men like me can have something good. You were always good, Dante. You just needed someone to remind you." He kissed me as the first stars appeared overhead, and I tasted promise and passion and the kind of love that only comes from choosing each other every single day, despite the darkness, despite the danger, despite every logical reason to walk away. We'd built something extraordinary from $18 and a moment of honesty, an empire of love in a world of shadows, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. Years later, when Sophia was old enough to ask how Mommy and Daddy met, I'd tell her a fairy tale about a princess working in disguise and a king who'd forgotten how to see beauty and how one small act of kindness had saved them both. I'd tell her about the power of choosing love even when it's dangerous, about staying even when leaving would be easier, about finding home in the most unexpected places. And someday, when she was older, I'd tell her the whole truth about the SUVs and the threats and the impossible choice I'd made to stay, about her father's world of shadows and power, and how love had been the light that guided us through it. But tonight, with Dante's arms around me and our daughter sleeping peacefully in her nursery, guarded by men who would die to protect her, I simply stood in the moment, grateful, transformed, home. The invisible waitress and the Mafia king, bound together by fate and choice and a love that had bloomed in the darkness.